This slide shows about the effects of testing on children's achievement. The first half of the slideshow examines classroom quizzes and low-stakes testing, and the second half looks at high-stakes testing. My personal prediction was that testing was not related to student achievement, but the results of the research that I'm going to share on these slides shows that I was only partially correct. So this first series of slides is based on an article by Roediger and appeared in the New York Times 2 years ago. And he wrote this essay, and in the essay examined what were the effects of frequent low-stakes testing on student achievement. And more specifically, does classroom testing improve learning? Is a test-enhanced environment effective for students' learning? And then he said previous research in classroom quizzes is based on this theoretical framework. The process of information retrieval improves learning, active retrieval improves memory, and so notice they separate learning from memory. And feedback to students' quiz attempts improves learning and retention. The study is done on middle school students, although the 6th grade applies to your certification area, and it included students with disabilities, and notice that 3/4 of the students in the study go on to college. So that's interesting in terms of the study population. Would that population, results of study on that population, apply to yours? An important aspect of the Roediger study was that he used experimental design. So that was control in a treatment group. The assumption was that both groups were the same, with the exception of the use of frequent quizzes and tests. And they used classroom textbooks, and after a reading, post-tests were immediately given, or a lesson, and another quiz 2 days later, and then end of semester exams. So a lot of quizzing and testing. And what were the results? Students remembered better when the information was previously assessed on quizzes. The effect was shown to persist over lengthy retention intervals, even up to a year. Testing improves student performance from the range of 75% to about 90% or better. That's really, so from a C to an A- grade, that's pretty good. And that he found that students earn an average grade of A- material that had been presented in class once and subsequently quizzed 3 times. But one important thing to recognize is that the quizzes were a form of instruction too, because they provided students feedback on the basis of how they answered the quizzes. And this compared with C+, a material that students were presented with the same info, and the info was reviewed but not quizzed. So the outcome of this study was, 1, according to Roediger, a test-enhanced learning environment can be successfully implemented in classroom settings, and it works well in subjects that are heavily fact-centered, such as social studies, science, history, so on. And unless students have mastered the basic structure of knowledge within a domain or discipline, they have little hope of creative application. Quizzing improves student awareness and transfer of learning. And again, low-pressure testing makes learning stronger, and it embeds it more securely in memory. Tests serve students best when they're integrated in the regular business of teaching and learning, and not separate, as in standardized testing. And then process of retrieving information that is found in low-stakes classroom-based tests is beneficial. Low-stakes classroom quizzes improves learning, and students benefit from the use of quizzes. And students in a class with a regular routine of low-stakes quizzes remember and carry their learning forward more than in classes without that routine. So I found that Roediger's work really interesting, that low stakes testing improves learning. That was with middle school, so you'll have to think about whether it applies to, say, the intermediate grades, and does it apply as well with children with disabilities. Roediger indicates that it does. So that, for me, that surprised me. High stakes testing, the results of research on this didn't surprise me, because I had known for a while that high stakes testing doesn't improve learning. It's just a measure at a point in time. But some people think that it does. So here's what's the research say, and it was this slide shows based on the work of Nichols, Glass, and Berliner, and the overall research question, and what's the relationship between high stakes testing and student achievement. And then previous research showed that standardized tests are used to evaluate students and teachers, and the assumption was that testing improves learning, and the assumption is that tying consequences to children's test performance will improve teaching and improve learning. But the research shows that there's little or no relationship between reading and achievement and a weak one in math in terms of students' performance on these high-stakes tests, such as the New York State exams, and their actual learning. High-stakes testing, you should know, really began with No Child Left Behind, although that's not the case for New York, Illinois, and Texas, who have always used high-stakes testing. The research shows that student scores do go up, but it's really the result of test preparation and familiarity with test-taking skills. That's from the work of Shepard. So Laurie Shepard argued that it didn't improve learning, these high-stakes tests, just test-taking skills. And yet, that Shepard's findings have been ignored by No Child Left Behind, and there's scant evidence that it improves students' learning. So this research study with Glass and Berliner, and the third researcher, whose name I forget at the moment, looked at what's the relationship between state-level high-stakes testing and student achievement, and they looked at high-stakes testing in 25 states in grades 4 and 8, and they argued that it's really an index of pressure. They just used correlational study. This looked at groups after the fact, so it wasn't an experimental score study. Notice they used the NAEP scores between 2005 and 2009. And what was the result? High-income students score on average better than middle and low-income students. Testing pressures are significantly and positively correlated with poverty index. The poorer the school, the greater the pressure. High-stakes testing pressure has no measurable connection to performance of either rich or poor students. And by that, the researchers mean that the wealthier kids will continue to perform well, and poor kids will continue to perform poorly on these exams. And their learning outcomes will be the same regardless of whether exams are used. And pressure is harmful to poor students. That means low-income students' reading achievement. There's some evidence that the testing pressure improves math performance slightly. I think that's because math is more of a discrete subject. You'll perform better on a high-pressure test if you learned your 4 times tables, whereas literacy is much more developmental and long-term in terms of what you learn in the classroom and whether it has an effect on a high-stakes pressure test. So the outcome, teachers get better at teaching to the test and students score better. And that's it. There's no evidence that high-stakes testing improves learning. There's a great deal of evidence by Roediger that it does improve low stakes and low pressure quizzing improves learning. And that's it. And so I hope that is helpful.